Inner Peace, Better Health, where your healing story takes center stage. I'm your host, Shreya, and today we are joined by Bridget Budd, former corporate exec turned soulful novelist whose journey from repressed emotions to radical self acceptance is as powerful as it's relatable. Her new book, Trauma, Truth, and Spiritual Awakening, unpacks what happens when success masks suffering and how truth sets us free. So, welcome, Bridget. I'm honored to have you on my show.
Thank you, Shreya. I'm honored to be on your show and thank you for the invitation. Yes, my name is Bridget and I am a writer, a truth seeker, and kind of recovering, unrecognized overachiever, if that makes sense.
Yes, and that's so wonderful. And Bridget, you write about how trauma hides in high functioning lives. What did your own breaking point teach you about that illusion of having it all?
Yeah, it's such a poignant question and really kind of what led me to write Behind the Mirror, my first novel. The so I wouldn't say that I was overly successful. I mean, I had a career, I had the things, right? I had all the things that everyone thinks you should have. But there was just this underlying maybe theme that was happening for me that it just didn't feel like my life, if that makes sense. And the breaking point came when I was facing what I thought was my fourth divorce.
Yeah.
That sounds ridiculous, but I thought my marriage was ending yet again. And there was just this almost awakening of going, I am the common denominator here. What is going on? I have to start taking responsibility for myself and figuring out what is not working for me, what's showing up that is no longer working for me. And that was really the breaking point.
Yes, yes. And I think so many of us living polished lives while quietly unraveling inside. And also, what role did suppressed anger play in your spiritual
Mm.
awakening?
Oh, good gracious. I think my middle name was frustrated. Right? Um, there's my book is not about me. My book is about Julie, my character, but we share a lot of emotional DNA. And my husband, much like in Julie, there is an alignment with my husband used to call me Taz, the
Okay.
Tasmanian devil, because I was always spinning and I was always frustrated and I just always seemed out of control. And yeah, the repressed anger, I don't think it was at anyone directly, right? I think the anger was more like this. I was almost mad at myself because I just didn't feel like what I thought I should feel like. So the anger was directed more inwardly. And when it was directed inwardly, there was it fueled my desire to be busy. It fueled my desire to stay looking as though I was valuable and worthy and important enough to keep around. And that made me really, really angry.
Yes. That sounds like what you have faced, you have just stared. And also your book touches on the pain of unspoken truths. Why do you think truth telling is so pivotal for healing trauma?
I think truth telling is, I think there's two ways you can look at that is there's truth telling of how am I showing up and living my life? And am I being true to who I am? And when you ask that question, I think it's interesting because if someone would have asked me 7 or 8 years ago, am I showing up in the truth of who I am? I would have thought that they were crazy. I would have thought I'm like, why are they asking me this question? Because I think you don't know what you don't know. And when you are being honest with who you are, I mean, fully honest and transparent, that's when you start working on, the shadow side of yourself, all that stuff that you hide from everyone else. And you mentioned anger and I shared about the frustration. I think I was becoming angry and frustrated because I knew I wasn't speaking my own truth. I knew I wasn't showing up as my own in my own truth because I would constantly be one person for this person. I would show up as someone to make this other person happy. I was really playing a lot of parts in my life and I was abandoning myself. And ironically, I was emotionally abandoned as a child. So it's interesting to see how that manifests in itself. And yeah, so I think, truth is really important to our health because health is more than just tending to the physical body. It requires us to understand our mind. And I think so many women focus on physical health while, kind of silently carrying out those emotional patterns that sabotage it, like stress and perfectionism and overfunctioning. And I know this very intimately. And on the outside, I was very physically healthy. And I was fortunate to have that. But underneath, buried childhood trauma was quietly running the show for me.
Yeah. And I think that realization that truth is everything is very important for your mental, physical, and holistic health. That is so beautiful. And thank you for sharing that with all of us. And what is the first step for someone afraid to face their own?
Well, first, I think you have to be honest with yourself to say that you're not in your own truth, because I think a lot of us don't know what that means. Again, if you would have asked me this, many, many years ago, 10 years ago, I would have thought that I was living my own truth, right? I think part of it starts with, not even part of it, it starts with awareness. It starts with awareness of saying to yourself, how am I showing up? And is it serving me in the moment? Because for a long time, how I was showing up did serve me. It was a lot of it was my survival strategy. And there came a point where it didn't work for me anymore. And that's when I had to face that truth. So first, I think it's recognizing and being aware that you're not in your own truth and being able to compassionately admit that to yourself, right? Because I think, awareness precedes choice and choice precedes change. So I can't
Mm.
change anything if I'm not aware of it. And if I become aware of it, but then I don't want to face that truth, I don't have choices in the matter, right? I'm kind of stuck in how I'm showing up.
Yeah. And naming it is brave. And someone it's the most sacred thing we can do. And also you pivoted from corporate life to writing. What was that, a spiritual decision, a survival mode, or both?
There's a lot in between there. So I left the corporate world, and when I left the corporate world, like many high functioning, over functioning women, I was faced with then, what do I do? I didn't have anything to prove in the world. I didn't have a job. I didn't feel like I was valuable. So for the next couple of years, I just dug into a bunch of things. I started several businesses. I worked with other people. And it just kept compounding and compounding. And I then, when I was faced with thinking that I would be divorced again or needed to get divorced again, I had this very, very spiritual experience. And I'm not a religious person. My parents were not religious. And so I didn't have any exposure to religion or anything spiritual. So when I took this trip and had this very spiritual experience, it was very awakening for me. And then I ended up becoming certified in different trauma healing modalities. Gosh, over 400 some hours in yoga. I became a board certified health coach. And I dabbled in that for a while. I was coaching and had clients, and that was interesting for me as well. But it still didn't feel like my calling until I started writing. And when I started writing, which I didn't know I could write. Listen, I'm not saying the book is great. Maybe I'm not a good writer, but something was in me saying that I wanted to kind of share the knowledge that I had and kind of create this fictional character, if you will, and this experience of this character. Because what I found in coaching is that a lot of people, how do I put this? I think sometimes coaching and recognizing our own patterns, beliefs, and behaviors can be very confronting for people, and not everyone's willing to face that right away.
Yeah.
And so I wanted a way that I could reach many people and I could create something that seemed less confronting, to where maybe you're reading this and you see yourself in Julie, my character's story. If you see parts of yourself, or if it even activates something in you that says, maybe this isn't my personality, maybe this is a pattern. And so there was a lot in between going from being in the corporate world to a writer. And it's been about
Mhm.
4 or 5, well, I think I was at 2015, maybe 2014 when I left the corporate world. So it's been a good 10 years. There's a big chunk in between there. And I think I'm now really starting to kind of get into my groove of being in my own truth and really kind of being where I'm supposed to be in the world, right? I think we're always where we're supposed to be, but this feels very genuine to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yes, and that leap from logic to intuition, it's terrifying and thrilling. And how did your identity shift through that transformation?
Oh, I probably am not the same person that I was. And you can see I get emotional from it because it's still pretty, it's not raw, but it is emotional for me. And I get very emotional when I'm doing some of these interviews, you'll see it. And I think it's emotional because it's amazing and it's amazing to know how I lived the first, maybe 45, 48 years of my life in a space that was all survival. And to feel into the last 5 years of being actually who I am, that's really emotional because again, you don't know what you don't know. And it's been a big transformation in the sense that what I thought was some of my personality wasn't my personality. So it's very eye-opening and I learn new things about myself all the time, including writing. I never thought I enjoyed writing. But when I was in school and I was in college, which I didn't get to finish, I never graduated college. I had to, kind of survive on my own. And I didn't realize what I liked and what I didn't like. And so it's sometimes it's interesting. It's fascinating. It's still like I'm discovering myself, which is fun and sometimes nerve-wracking, right? So yeah, but it's interesting and I wouldn't change it for anything, but it's been a very interesting journey. Yeah, I'm still discovering who I am, which is interesting at 52 years old.
Yes, yes. And I think this is like a process. Like as long as we leave, we will just explore who we are and what is in between us. And that's so beautiful. And you are very brave, I would say, that you understand what you are actually and what do you love to do and to come to such platforms and talk about it and inspire others. This is so beautiful and commendable. And also in the healing journey, how do we know we are progressing, especially when old patterns return?
Yeah, for me, I knew and it's interesting because I think as humans we have to define something. We have to say, if I'm on this journey, it has to look like this, or progress looks like this. And I think if we have to label it or kind of define it in some way, I would invite someone to recognize that progress obviously is different for everyone, right? And progress might be as simple as just waking up and feeling better in your skin for 10
Mm.
minutes. It might just be waking up and feeling happy for a few minutes, right? It depends on the level that you have experienced in life. And I think progress is never linear. Healing is never linear, right? And there's always, it feels like sometimes there's 2 steps forward and 10 steps backwards.
Yeah.
And I think when we try to push that too quickly, and I was guilty of this. I started learning these modalities and started healing. I thought, oh, great, it's been 6 months. I should be healed. No, I think this is a lifelong journey. I think, and when you sign up for it, people don't tell you this, right? They don't tell you what this is a lifelong thing. You're not going to be healed in 6 months. First of all, you're not broken, so there's nothing to fix. It's about learning more about who you are and showing up in your own truth and recognizing your own patterns, beliefs, and behaviors. And when you recognize those things, you get to shift them. But shifting, we'll put it this way, it took me 48 years to get to where I was. It wasn't going to take 48 minutes to be healed. So I think having the disclaimer of knowing that this is a lifelong process. If I'm no longer growing, I'm dying. The point here is to grow and to learn and to expand, right? And so just know when you start this journey that it is not for the faint of heart. It is difficult to face your own truths. And it's also liberating to face your own truths and to heal the things that you want to heal. So, progress, to answer your question, a long way around the barn, is subjective. And you get to define what progress means for you. Again, that could be something small, it could be something big. But I think as an individual, you get to define what progress looks like. And the minute we start having to put some type of timeline on it or some type of goal to achieve it, we've kind of put ourselves right back in the place of not having self-compassion, right? And not being kind to our own selves and knowing that this is just, I feel like we are a spiritual being having a human experience. So let's have that experience. And it might be a long journey and it might be a short journey. You get to define that as a person. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I think sometimes falling apart is actually falling into alignment. And can setbacks actually signal deeper integration?
I think so. And I've experienced that because, there are times where I thought I'd healed something. And here's a really good example. I'm grateful that all the exposure I've had to different modalities and different certifications, I've experienced a lot of different people and remained friends with other coaches and things like that. So as a great example of a, and I wouldn't even call it a setback, right? Because I don't like to define or label things, but I would call it as I thought I healed my own mother wound. I've gone through women's retreats and I've done a lot of work on kind of healing my own mother wound. But as I finished writing my book, I realized there were more things that were coming up for me. So I think it's not a matter of even labeling it as a setback. It's going, hey, I thought I healed this, but clearly there's something else that I haven't healed. There's another part of it. And I think things come into our alignment for that reason. Perhaps writing my book wasn't about for anybody else. It was just about me and learning I still had other things to heal. And so I would say, as a setback, it wasn't even really a setback. It was more awareness and alignment with going, hey, Bridget, you still have some work to do on this space. And I think it was more of that, right? Rather than kind of defining it as a setback. But, if that's how we're defining it, then yeah, I think there's always again, 2 steps forward and maybe 5 steps backwards. But that's okay. Because again, healing, like many things, isn't linear. And I think that's kind of beautiful too. I think I mean, that'd be great if you could recognize all of the things that you'd want to change and you could change them pretty quickly, but then what else would you do?
Yeah,
Like, what else is there to learn? I like learning.
yes. I truly agree with you. And I think thank you for sharing all your experiences. This is beautiful. And for those who feeling spiritually disconnected or emotionally flat, what is one practice that helped you to reconnect with your inner truth?
Hmm. There's quite a few, but I think one of the most spiritual experiences I've had that I was able to use as a daily practice and still do to some degree is I went through a 200-hour Kundalini teacher training. And for me, Kundalini actually led me to studying Ayurveda. And, the Vedic tradition of mantra and movement and, kind of being connected spiritually that way, that was a practice that led me to a very specific discipline with myself and really experiencing something that I could trust in and believe in. Again, I share with you that my parents weren't very religious or spiritual, and so it was a very new experience for me. And it really it really that discipline brought me back to who I feel like I am at times, right? And I may not feel like that always, but knowing that there for me is something bigger than myself. And I don't have to define that as in a very specific religion, right? I don't have to define that with one thing. And I think for me, it was really the art and the beautiful spiritual practice of doing Kundalini very, very, in a very disciplined manner for several years. And I take parts and pieces of that practice with me often throughout the day. Often it's interesting because the other day I kind of sat and I hadn't done this mantra in a while, but there was just something that made me just kind of sit into it and kind of feel into it and really work with a particular mantra. And just feeling those vibrations within my own body sometimes are very kind of settling to me, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes. This is so beautiful, and thank you for sharing this practice. And I think real peace doesn't mean life stop shaking. It means you stop being shaken. And this is so beautiful conversation with you. And thank you for sharing all your knowledge, all your experience, and you're a wonderful person. And if my listeners want to connect with you, then what's the best way?
They can connect with me through my website, which is bridgetbudd.com. I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn, and they can connect with me through my character Julie and my book Behind the Mirror.
Yes, yes. And I will make sure to attach all the details and links below so that the listeners can find them easily and get in touch with you and have a talk with you and know more about you because you're a wonderful person. And Bridget, your story is a reminder that truth is a gateway to peace, and peace begins when we choose to come home to ourselves. And to all my listeners who are listening, healing is not a finish line, it's a reclamation. Your trauma doesn't define you, your truth does. So stay honest, stay curious, and keep walking forward toward that light within. This is Inner Peace Better Health, and your journey matters.